We are gathered here today to discuss a very, very important topic, namely the role of indigenous healers during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you will be aware, the World Health Organization has consistently reminded us that the majority of people in the world rely a lot on indigenous healers for their health care, sometimes using allopathic medicine simultaneously with indigenous in attending to their illness. We are also aware of the holistic conception of health and illness that has been pronounced on by the World Health Organization, namely the recognition that illness and health comprises a number of dimensions: the biomedical, the spiritual, the ecological, the psychological, etc. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought to our attention the continuing tensions between traditional healthcare systems in the sense of those that are based on allopathic medicine and indigenous healing. The best example perhaps being the COVID-19 organic medicine that was developed in Madagascar, which has since not found favor around the world. Here with us today are a number of distinguished colleagues out this semi-con allopathic medicine. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Hassan Kaya, who is the Director of the Department of Science and Innovation, NRF Center of Excellence in Indigenous Knowledge Systems, located at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Welcome, Professor Kaya.
Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. I would also like to introduce to all of you Mr. Siabonga Mkhize, who is the Managing Director of Umsamo Institute, as well as a master's student in the biomedical sciences at the University of Witwatersrand. Welcome,
thank you.
Siabonga.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure as well to introduce Professor Ngeba Galeni, who is a biochemist and also the head of the discipline of traditional medicine at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, who is also a well-known advocate of the development and the testing of indigenous medicines. Welcome, Professor Galeni.
Thank you a lot, Chair and Professor Mkhize.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, during the course of the day, we may be joined by practitioners of indigenous medicine as well, and I will introduce them at that point in time. I would like to begin with you, Professor Kaya. The tension between traditional medicines and allopathic medicine that have been brought to our attention by the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you please share your thoughts on this subject for a couple of minutes?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I hope everybody can hear me. Before I continue, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so good afternoon, colleagues, good afternoon, viewers and listeners. Chairperson, first of all, I would like to say that it's important that PPCL is here with us because especially representing the healers themselves and the associations, because to be part or very inconsiderate and part of the marginalization if we would have been talking on behalf of the healers, because to be part of the marginalization. So it's important that she's with us here and she can share her views on behalf of the Association of Traditional Healers and herself as a healer. Another important aspect is the fact that when Shakila invited me to participate, I told her categorically that I would like to focus on the issue of core knowledge production between knowledge systems, Because if you look at the history of our continent and the history of other marginalized indigenous communities, the marginalization of cultures has gone hand in hand with the marginalization of indigenous knowledge system, especially in our case in Africa. And another important aspect I would like to point is connected to the issue of core knowledge production, especially in the mitigation of global pandemics like COVID-19, is the fact that while I agree that Western science has improved and made life easier for human beings, it does not have all sustainable solutions to global challenges, including pandemics such as we see nowadays with COVID-19. And this is emphasized the point I'm saying that because there is nobody with a solution, sustainable solution to these pandemics, we need the complementarity and democracy of knowledge systems, including indigenous knowledge in the global pool of knowledge. The pandemic you are facing now is a global pandemic affecting everybody. Some of, for instance, it's interesting to note where some of us, we come from societies where we don't have a lot of white people, and there are people who believe that white people don't die. But COVID-19 has shown that everybody is affected, everybody can die. So that necessitates that nobody has final solution or sustainable solution to these pandemics. We need to work together, especially for us of Africans who have Ubuntu philosophy, solidarity, care, reciprocity of humanity. So, and the whole world appreciates this aspect that we need to work in solidarity to mitigate the current pandemic. So it is very arrogant for one knowledge system, especially Western science, to assume that it has all solutions to global challenges, not only in terms of health. We have issues like climate change, we have issues of environmental degradation. We need to work together, especially our knowledge systems, to ensure that we find sustainable solutions to these global aspects. Also, there's a tendency to assume that these local communities, indigenous knowledge holders, because they've not gone through the Western scientific formal system, so they're not experts. But a large proportion of our people, they live with them in the communities. Right? And also an important aspect is very naive to take health as just a biological aspect or a physical aspect. See, there are issues of emotional dimensions, there are psychological dimensions, there are spiritual dimensions. And these aspects cannot be handled in the laboratory, cannot be handled by laboratory medicine. They involve other expertise, which in the communities we have people. We have also spiritual leaders. We have people, we have even, we need to extend the concept of indigenous knowledge holders, because even our grandmothers, although they're not practitioners of traditional medicine, which also need to be expanded. Traditional medicine is not just the plants or the laboratory medicine, whatever. It involves all the dimensions of emotional, psychological, emotional, counseling, things like that. The care we have in our communities, the survival strategies we have in our communities, which our governments and other stakeholders need to mobilize to ensure that we come with inclusive, sustainable solutions to these pandemics. So the question I'm trying to emphasize is whether there is nothing wrong with agreeing or disagreeing on how we understand the world, but we're using Western science as the standard to which indigenous ways of knowing are measured is quite inappropriate and is cultural arrogance. So knowledge systems, including Western science, need also to ensure that it works together with other knowledge systems, especially indigenous systems, to find inclusive solutions to the problems we face in our societies. Pandemics like health challenges are not only biological, as I pointed, or physical phenomena. They include psychological, emotional, and other aspects. So the most important thing I say that if we have to have a sustainable solution to pandemics like COVID-19, different knowledge holders need to work together to ensure that it becomes inclusive. It also helps to build the trust It makes Western science more relevant to society and local community through sharing perspectives which were not known before to Western science. It makes EOT create societies, better societies, because it does not, the core knowledge production does not only benefit those who are involved in the production, but also other members of society. So it makes societies better. It builds trust. It also mitigates the problem of looking marginalized communities and groups as mere victims of vulnerable to health challenges, hence underestimating their survival strategies, which needs to be studied, mobilized for developing inclusive and sustainable policies. I think there is need also to overcome the question of research methodologies, in the sense that although if you look at traditional medicine emphasizes more or indigenous knowledge on qualitative aspects, and people claim that Western science is more quantitative, but there is what we call complementarity of knowledge system. There is triangulation where both quantitative and qualitative methodological approaches can be used, as we find ourselves in social sciences. I think I should stop there.
Thank you very much, Professor Kaya, for those very, very insightful comments. You have touched a lot of issues, emphasizing complementarity, but the issues of methodology as well. I'm sure our participants will come back and want to ask questions on those issues. Mr. Siyabonga Mkhize, you work very, very closely with Umsamo Institute under the leadership of Dr. Vivi Mkhize, but at the same time, you are a biomedical scientist yourself. Could you please give us your insights into how traditional healing could contribute to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. As President Mkhize introduced me, I work at Umsamo Institute, and the beautiful thing about my master's at the moment is I work with Tracy Sneeman and Professor Jaya George from WITS, who are both as passionate as I am about toxicology. And we really use the analytical technique of mass spectrometry to delve deep into medicinal herbs and medicines and to better understand the composition of herbs and medicines. So I think, let me briefly explain how one actually acquires a herb or a medicine as an indigenous healer. The indigenous healers are given these herbs and medicines by their ancestors. And then at that time, what happens is they disperse it in the community to alleviate a particular ailment of sorts. But now what would happen is someone would find out or hear about this particular herb or medicine, and before the actual healer can go about acquiring the resources or getting access to someone who is at a university where they do have a mass spectrometer and they can acquire their IP, that individual will then take it overseas or to another country where they have an abundance of mass spectrometers, which we don't have in South Africa. But that isn't necessarily to say that we don't have the resources. The issue at the moment is that the indigenous healers don't have a close enough relationship with the medical scientists and the toxicologists. And we are limited in South Africa because we don't have the infrastructure to become a qualified toxicologist. You have to go to, I think it's Germany, to become a qualified toxicologist. And the field of toxicology as a whole is very limited in South Africa. So should one want to investigate further the efficacy of their particular herbal medicine, they would be limited being in South Africa because of the access to toxicology. And toxicology being the fundamental first step when it comes to the development of a particular drug and also dispersing it at larger quantities around the world or across the nation. So the relationship that we're trying to establish at the moment between ourselves and Umsamo and UKZN is to try and bring the traditional healers with the herbs and medicines closer to the medical scientists, as well as ecologists that we do have. So myself and my supervisor, Tracy Sneemanov, have started looking at a couple. We obviously don't have the resources and the manpower to look at a whole host of them. And by using the GCMS, which is gas mass spectrometry, you're able to create a library. And once you have a library of compounds, what you're then able to do is any other compound or any other medicinal compound from an indigenous healer that comes about, you immediately have a reference or a means of finding out or comparing what is actually in that particular herbal medicine. So that is I think it's ourselves, UCT, those are the two institutions which are very strong with GCMS. And by establishing that relationship, by building the library, we are beginning to create our own research, our own literature. And that GCMS library means that we can then begin to establish a gold standard for a particular herb. So what would happen is, one of the studies we did a couple of years ago, we found that some herbs, same name, but they were laced with various compounds which were toxic. And so by creating a library, or a GCMS library, we can now have something to compare to, so that should anyone decide to come up with something that isn't legitimate, then we can then catch them out. That is the first and most immediate step. So from Umsamo Institute's perspective, that is what we are working on right now, which is the most immediate step that one can take to actually working towards this collaboration between indigenous healers as well as medical scientists. And then once we are there once we're beginning to develop the library, once we have the systems and protocols in place, then we can begin to chase the IPs, and we can begin to try and mass produce. And I understand people's frustration with feeling that traditional healers and chemists are marginalized, but we've also got to understand that we also need to put the protocols and procedures in place. If you take a panado, you know exactly what's in that panado and its exact quantities. So we need to put those processes in place, and we also need more healers engaging with people such as Umsamo and Mkhize, and so we can get to that place where we have established a library. So for now, I think where we should be looking at it and where we should dedicate our resources to is simply getting medical sciences and traditional healers to sit down together and share their herbs and medicines. It's the most practical step that we can take right now, and to just get the job done and actually add value. And on top of building the library of GCMS, we will also begin to, sorry, I think my sorry, bit of an issue there.
Welcome back.
Sorry, I had a bit of an issue there. And once we've built the library, we can then begin to have our resources dedicated to acquiring more mass spectrometers, to doing more liver toxicity studies, because at the moment we don't have those resources in South Africa, or they are very limited. Like I said, it's between ourselves and UCT. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Siyabonga Mkhize. There was a little bit of disturbance with the transmission, but I hope that we have covered all the points that you wanted to mention. Could you please confirm that?
Most definitely, I have confirmed. I have covered all the points that I wanted to. I just simply wanted to outline what exactly is the most practical next step that we can dedicate our resources to.
Okay, thank you very much. And indeed, we have mentioned a lot of issues that are always discussed in relation to traditional healing. I hope that the participants and listeners will pick up on some of your points, especially the issue of revealed knowledge. versus a knowledge that is derived through the logic of the experiment and clinical trials, because you indicated that point. You also touched on efficacy and effective dosage. As we all know, it is always alleged that traditional medicines have not been tested, so we don't know much about their toxicology, efficacy, and effective dosage that needs to be applied. Professor Kaleni, welcome again. Could you please give us a short presentation that we have prepared on this topic? Professor Kaleni.
Hi, everyone. I'm joined here by my Kaleni Jr. Thank you, firstly, to the organizers of this event, Chairperson, the university, and the panelists. I want to greet and everyone who is participating in this discussion. A very timely and important one. And I'm grateful that in the planning, of course, there was considerations that there will be traditional health practitioners in the panel. I guess there are some unforeseen circumstances and that have happened. But I know there are those who have joined in I'm sure they will make comments when the time is appropriate. COVID has become a leveler of the playing field. I must start with that statement. We've seen the financial systems of the world crumble about 8-10 years ago. And I think what the COVID virus has done, it has also further crumbled a number of things that the Western system probably has made us believe in. And it then makes us look deep into ourselves. When you hear there's a disease, there's no vaccine, it's gonna come 2 years from now. When it comes, it may not start with you. It may start with someone else. What are you going to do? And we know in moments of crisis, deep crisis, you look to your roots, you look into who you are. And I think it's time that Africa does that, to begin to look into itself, to begin to explore how it can confront the challenges it faces based on its own systems. And I think that's what the COVID is doing to us. Secondly, in looking at us, I think, I'm not sure, I speak more as a South African probably, in the fact that we fought apartheid, but we've never confronted colonialism in its truth to see what has it done to us. Why do we think the way we think? We're Africans, but we want to behave and think like we're Mlungus from somewhere else, not in this African continent. And I think COVID is making us look into that. And when it comes to health, there are solutions that are indigenous to us. And that we cannot wait for a vaccine that will come a long way. And I think Madagascar has shown that. And we salute the president of Madagascar for becoming one of those heads of states who stands up and say, my people have knowledge. They are indigenous plants that occur given by God to us that we have used in the past to deal with these things. Let's look into them. Clearly, for us as scientists, we say, let's explore those things. It's a welcome step. And I think the World Health Organization in Africa is embracing that and saying, let's all pull our heads together and do this. The second thing, before we debate the herbs and the treatments and all of that stuff, I think I am going to say this. In South Africa, if we want to deal with our health, we must also return to our land. We are landless people. We can't even have this mhlonyane that everyone is speaking about. If we live in a squatter camp, where are you gonna grow it and find it? And so we also read, it needs to help us to relook, and where are we? What is our standing? And what is our relationship to our land and our health and our healthiness? Our food that we eat, what do we eat? And our indigenous foods, are they our source? That in a time like this, we can only rely on food parcels. That it's great that people have a generosity of spirit to help, but there should have been a system that the foods that we eat are also part of our health and well-being. And there was a concept, and I'm sorry, I may not know it in all the South African languages. Ukuqiniswa. And it's a concept that in many African homes, we know when it's gonna be December, the father calls his family and he will bring his herbalist to put in some muti to make sure that the family can withstand the season. And when the winter comes, there is a period that that will happen. And I think what COVID has done to us in South Africa, in particular when government failed to consult this sector in particular in developing a plan during the lockdown to say what's going to happen to some sectors. They were never classified as essential workers. And now you say, we have a pandemic, we have a danger that is attacking us, but we cannot call the people who can come and strengthen us to deal with the pandemic. The strengthening is not only about the virus, but we also are mental beings, as spiritual beings. When you are attacked, you don't know, we don't only see the virus as a virus, but we're also spiritual beings. There's a spiritual attack. There are things that attack us in our minds and we become anxious. And we show that behavior of our anxiety by buying 4 trolleys of food in a supermarket. And you don't know who's the next person who's gonna come and buy, where will they get the food to buy? And it makes us our homes becomes a fort that we live in. And so this disease has shown other elements of us where we need to revert back to our humanity, our humanness, our Ubuntu, and say, I think Africa, it's your time to begin to stand up and you to use your own, use what you have to get what you want. We need to look into ourselves, look at our own solutions. We need to revive our economy as we talk now. Companies have closed and things like that, but we have knowledge and things that we can utilize that can take our economy and our country forward. And I'm just saying that, in these responses, I think there's been unfortunate circumstances that have happened. And one of those has been this debate about tobacco, and I probably want to address it in the sense that for Sangomas, they need ukwai as they exercise their practice. So when you ban access to it and there's no markets when they can go and access it, some people need to get a permit to go to the forest to access some of the things. So it becomes a system that is well thought, but somehow has excluded through no consulting, because had you consulted this sector, they would have probably told you where there's a shortcoming insofar as the trade, and in the trade is about making the life of our people better and nothing else. And I think I'm going to stop here. I will mention briefly to say that the Department of Science and Innovation has been also making attempts to say, let's bring in traditional healers, scientists, such that we can, through research, and make plausible solutions that can come forward as time that goes. I think I must hold it here, and probably there will be much more conversation as we go. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Kaleni, for this comprehensive presentation, highlighting also the role of government and issues of colonization, probably mental colonization as well. I'm sure panelists and other people will take you on that issue later. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very excited that we have now been joined by Gogo Phepsile Masego, who is a traditional indigenous healer herself, and also serving on the President's African Indigenous Spirituality Task Team, as well as the DSI NRF Center of Excellence as an advisor. Welcome, Gogo Phepsile. We are very, very excited because now we are going to have a traditional healer speaking directly to the participants and the audience. Over to you, Gogo Masego. Could you please unmute yourself, Gogo Masego?
Thank you very much, Prof. And good afternoon to the rest of the panelists, and also Thokozani to the audience. Thank you very much for having us here. I'm not sure if, am I audible enough?
You are very audible.
Yes, you are. Thokozani. Do you want me to talk now?
Yes, if you could present or engage in us in a short discussion of about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open the discussion. We seem to have a problem. She's not audible. Gogo Masego, can you hear us? We seem to be having a technical problem.
She's online. I think she's frozen.
Okay, I think we'll make an effort to bring her back, but while we are waiting for her to come back, I think we need to start acknowledging some of the questions that are coming. There are also issues, for example, people commenting that traditional healers need also to be involved in the research that is being undertaken, and that they also need to benefit from the research. We all know this is a very, very old debate whereby research emanating from traditional healers ended up being patented elsewhere without traditional healers benefiting from years and years of intellectual property that had been given to them from generation to generation. I think it's a very, very important consideration. Can I check at this time whether...
I think she's back, Prof. She's back, yes.
Wonderful. Could you please continue with your presentation, Gogo Masego?
Okay, no, thank you very much, Prof. I sincerely apologize that I have problems. My connection is so unstable. And I think it's the location where I am that is causing this kind of hard.
we have another problem with the connectivity.
But in any case, Prof, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
The connection is so unstable here. I'm so sorry to say. But then let me, okay. Let me just continue to say we have a problem with, okay, we've got a problem with the connectivity here. I don't know what's happening, but in any case, let me just continue so that I don't delay the rest of the panelists. Prof. Neba spoke very well when he said we are in the because of to drive, but instead, they further the colonial understanding and thinking. So that is the challenge that we have as healers.
Chair, she's frozen again. Maybe
and the reason why we want to we've not. How is it now?
Yeah, can you try without the video? Maybe it will be better because I think that we can hardly hear. So let's try without a video to see if it works better.
Yeah, someone was saying that. Yes, I'm not sure if it's better now without the video.
It's better now. It's better.
Much better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just saying I want to take off from where Prof. Neba Galeni left it to say it is so unfortunate that in a country and in a continent, Africa, we have to constantly remind our principals and politicians of who we are and constantly be able to make them realize the importance of putting traditional medicine high up on the map and as a solution for healthcare. That we've got important legislation such as the National Health Act, the Traditional Health Practitioners Act. We then made a lot of noise, and thanks to the media and to colleagues in the research fraternity, in research councils that supported us in the endeavor to call government to account and make politicians to account and say, why so much injustice? So we want to say to the audience tonight, I mean this afternoon, to say, after realizing that we have been left out from consultation, we then demanded from President and also ministers that we wanted to be involved. So from that pressure, we then got an audience with minister, and it has been going on until now. So which is very, very important. But then also the most important thing that I can say to the audience here is that we've also spoken to the Department of Science and Innovation to say to them that within the IKS unit of the department, let us rather have let us rather look into the research for traditional medicine. Because if we don't research traditional medicine, it will be as though traditional medicine cannot be able independently to provide answers, to problems of COVID. Then we then worked with the Department of Science and Innovation to come up with 24 plans. From the 24 plans, we then came up with 8 medicinal plants. Professor Neba Galeni is one of the scientists that is also working with us on that, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal is one of the science councils that is involved in the project, and the project is hosted by the University of the Free State. In any case, what I'm trying to say to people, I know that there's one question that asked, why is it that we are not part of providing solutions? We are part of that. The only thing is that we cannot talk about the merits and demerits yet because the process is still ongoing. We are yet to hear from scientists that are part of us as to how far is the process going. But then the other thing that is important that people need to know is that such a project is normally, such projects of innovation, particularly using African traditional medicine, are normally underfunded. And that's the kind of noise that we'll continue to make to government to say, let us put more money onto this project, because if we don't put adequate funding to it, we are going to be stifling it, and we are going to say traditional medicine cannot provide answers. And yet we are doing it deliberately to give prominence to Western sciences. So those are some of the backgrounds. But also the other thing is bigger than just research. The other most important thing that we need to look into is that there's need for us to constantly, and with the same effort, continue to transform SAHPRA. SAHPRA is the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority in the country. It is that authority that is responsible for registering all traditional medicine, for codifying traditional medicine, for ensuring that traditional medicine, when registered, is able and codified, is able to
we seem to be having another challenge again with the connectivity.
Of healers are able to be transformed. So are we still losing each other? How is
We're
it now?
back. You're back now.
I'm so sorry about this. I was just saying to you that there's also a very big animal in the house, and that animal is SAHPRA. No matter how good we can, how much breakthroughs we can make in research, if we do not have a SAHPRA that is going to look after traditional medicine and ensure that it is well registered, codified, for it to be, to be paid equally and treated equally as other medicine sciences, it will be as good as nothing. So that's the other, that is where we are making, that's why we are putting a lot of effort on as well. And we would like the audience also to assist us to make all the necessary noise there. But also, I want to echo the sentiments by Professor Naiba to say, we need to, we need to applaud the efforts of Madagascar, a tiny country in the continent, Africa, that said, let us rather look south for solutions to southern problems. I think that's very, very important. In fact, they've set a precedent. But what is also important that we're looking to hear, which I also spoke to the president, because we had a meeting with the president 3 days ago, on Wednesday. And when we spoke to the president, we said to him, of course, we congratulated him and the ministers that are involved in the COVID program. But also we said we look to him to assist us to provide answers, to South Africans, because a lot of people in South Africa are asking the question, can medicine provide a solution? And we are reliant on the political will of the president and the ministers that are involved to make sure that traditional medicine is accorded a status, a good enough status that is going to be responsive to COVID challenges now. So that is what we said. And the other thing is that we said it would help because he's also chairperson of the African Union. And within that structure, it is very, very important that countries such as Madagascar, who are seen to be pro-African solutions, are not vilified, but instead we give them maximum support. And also South Africa also should ensure that it becomes one of the countries that provides these solutions and we get adequate funding. So I'm just saying these are some of the problems that we have in the country. Constantly we have, as healers, we have to go back to principles, to politicians, to reintroduce our work as traditional healers, to reintroduce traditional medicine as though we are in a country somewhere where traditional medicine has never been practiced. So that's the unfortunate part. But most importantly, it is that we know that because traditional medicine provides a solution for the mind, the body, and the spirit, and that is where the uniqueness of traditional medicine is at. And that is why we are saying it is very, very important that traditional medicine, like other sciences, is accorded a fair chance, so that we are able, because during this time of COVID, people are not necessarily going to die from COVID. Other people are going to die from depression and all of the mental illnesses and social challenges. And that is why it's important that we also work with other sciences and other therapies to make sure that we provide also psychological support, so that people's psychological and so that people's social challenges, you know, are reduced. So that's the other role that we think as healers we need to play. The other role that we know we can play very well is in education, you know, and in bringing out the right messages. But also the right messages people should understand. It is for us, the right messages is that we need to say to people, eat healthy. Your medicine should also be part of your food. And if you eat healthy, you need to make sure that you use medicines that are rich in potassium, that are rich in vitamins, in vitamin C, for instance, medicines that are going to help you, you know, to have your immune system well boosted. But we cannot always run to Western systems, you know, for your own body as an African person. We believe that we've got adequate natural resources that can help in building immunity. I mean, Professor Nceba also, when I came in, he was just speaking about the fact that umhlonyan and other plants have been used time memorial, you know, immemorial to treat people, particularly in the preventative. You know, we want to continue to use umhlonyan and other plants, because linyathelo also is another plant. And also yourself, Chair, you were just saying to us that, you know, when it's seasons, when it's change of seasons, umhlonyane would be one of the plants that are put into a bouquet of cocktail that will be used, you know, for preventative, that will be used to fumigate, even emakhaya. You know, it's not something that is new today. You need to make sure from imoya emibi. You need to make sure that you fumigate. You need to make sure to make sure that they prevent themselves from all sorts of illnesses. In any case, what I need to say is that those are some of the things that we've put forward to the minister and the president and also the country. But also, most important, lastly, it is that for traditional medicine to thrive, obviously there is need for us to establish a very good relationship between ourselves, the science councils, and also small business and all other institutions of government and departments that can assist in business development. Because if the business of traditional medicine production is not adequately supported, it will be futile. If we do not have land from where we can cultivate these plants, if we cannot involve communities and healers in the entire value chain for product production, it will be futile as well. So that is why it's important that when we have to develop a traditional medicine business, we need to make sure that we make it accessible. We need to make sure that we include as many people as possible, so that then it becomes a fully fledged business that is understood and also servicing all the people that are responsible in that value chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gogo Masego. It was important that I do not interrupt you while you are speaking, seeing that traditional healing has been silenced for a long period of time. I'm now going to turn your attention to a few questions that are being posed on the chat. I'm going to mention a few. I know we don't have enough time. There's one question here which is directed to Mr. Mkhize and Professor Kaya. It reads, it seems that Mr. Mkhize is arguing that treatments proposed by traditional healers should be analyzed using mass spectrometers so that they can be tested and integrated into the scientific method to validate them. While Professor Kaya is arguing that the community use of treatment over millennia is sufficient to validate efficacy and safety. How do the panelists respond to issues of this nature? There are also questions about the mass use of umhlonyane during this period of time. Some people are concerned that the mass harvesting of umhlonyane could lead to it being extinct. Could the panelists comment on these particular issues?
Okay, maybe let me just come in here, Prof. On the extinction, that is why I said you can't be a healer and not have land. That is why it's important that local government and the Department of Agriculture assist traditional health practitioners and even communities that work with healers, you know, to start cultivation programs wherein all the plants that we use for primary care in particular are well cultivated. But also, we also need to make sure that we have regional processing facilities where traditional health practitioners can have ownership in terms of business and be part of those programs wherein we can start up businesses and partner with other businesses so that we are able to take our medicines to those facilities for processing and all of those things. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that. So in terms of extinction, we very much agree with them. So I think we need to bring on board the Department of Environmental Affairs as well, so that they can help us with making sure that we've got funding support to make sure that at least we are able to cultivate umhlonyane massively, but also that there's also, you know, there's also control so that people do not just harvest randomly and also you know, make it to be extinct, because we need a lot of umhlonyane. But on the other hand, the other one is that the other one that they were asking is, do we need to put traditional medicine into a same scrutiny as Western medicine, or why investigate traditional medicine? We are doing this because we are not necessarily, with us as healers, we know umhlonyane does work for coughs, for flus, for fevers, for colds. But this time we are only subjecting it to the scrutiny for only just COVID, because we want to make sure that when we provide it and when we package it and commercialize it, people understand it for COVID, which is something that had not been done before. So it is not because we don't trust it. We have trusted it for many years, and there's nothing that can make us doubt it now. But the only thing that can make us doubt it now is that if whether or not we can be able to use it for this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maseko. Could you please hear from Mr. Mkhize and Professor Kaya? Should indigenous medicines be subjected to Western scientific methods before they can be made widely available? Or can we continue as they are?
So the reason why we would want to subject our traditional herbs and medicines to our 21st century analytical techniques is because you want validity and reproducibility. That is what you want at the very core of any herbal medicine that is going to be mass produced. Because without subjecting them to scientific analytical technique, you don't have a library, you don't have a reference of being certain what exactly this particular drug is made of. What is the composition of the compounds? And then without doing that, that means anybody can come out and say, Nami, I've also got umhlonyane. And anybody can come out and say, Nami, I've also got this herb or this medicine. We need to also look at protecting our people. And the best way to protect people is to use science, to subject it to science. You're protecting our people to be sure that if we make this particular compound available, it has been scrutinized by the highest standards, and we can be certain that this is what umhlonyane is. And that should you find anything else anywhere, it is not umhlonyane. So that when you do put your stamp of approval on that particular herb, your people can be certain that it is not laced with anything else, because we have found that there are many other compounds that are laced with a whole bunch with other compounds. More particularly, those compounds that they are using to lace are addictive ones. So some healers are lacing umhlonyani and a whole host of other effective drugs with addictive drugs so that the people keep coming back. So without that level of scrutiny, how are we going to detect that this drug or this umhlonyani has been laced? Hence, I am saying we cannot risk mass producing certain herbs and medicines without assurances of protecting our people. And that is my concern. Apart from the legalities in terms of patents and IPs, is protection of our people from those who decide to come up with fraudulent or illegitimate herbs and medicines. Because in our experience, there are many that continue to do that for economic gain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkhize. Could you please hear from Professor Kaya as well? And maybe I would also like to take this opportunity to invite all panelists at this stage to give us their concluding comments as we seem to be drawing towards the end of our webinar. Can we hear from you, Professor Kaya? I'm not sure if Professor Kaya is Professor Kaya, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah,
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. You see, Mr. Chairperson, why I chose the issue of core technology production, to come to this question which has been asked, whether the traditional medicine which has been used in a particular ecosystem, a particular cultural environment, can be validated using other knowledge systems. You see, most of these medicines have been used by people for years. And what the government of Madagascar did for the people in Madagascar was to affirm that this thing works and they've been used for years. So other people who want to use it outside Madagascar, and that's what Tanzania did, and was also misrepresented in the media. What Tanzania did was to take the medicine there and also tested it in Tanzania to see if it can also be used. The point I'm trying to make, medicine is culturally, ecologically specific. And in a particular ecosystem where it has been used for years, what you need is just to affirm. And you affirm in a way, if you come from another ecosystem or culture, and you want to involve with the people in knowledge production, there must be a working together to understand, to involve mutual understanding, interaction and respect. In other words, the two knowledge systems of validating, whether for validating or affirmation, should be as equal partners. But if you use other standards to validate, that is also a problem. And the second important thing is why most traditional healers and the local communities in Africa are skeptical is the validation has been used to make money, has been used to make money without beneficiation to the community where that plant or that knowledge is. So the question here, if, for instance, in Madagascar, they've been using that particular plant for years and people have used their own culturally specific ways of affirming it and validating it, I don't see that problem. And that's how the president of Madagascar was looking on those lines. But if the plant now is being validated using Western standards so that people can make money, or even sometimes to look down upon other cultures, that brings the problem. But people have been using these medicines for years. Europeans came to Africa only 400, even perhaps 300 years ago. And before that, we were sick, we were hungry, and we had our own ways of mitigating those challenges. And that's why we also, as I said, this COVID-19 is—
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor.
Yeah. Chair, I'm just gonna say these few words to conclude. There's a new virus. There's knowledge that has existed for a long time. And I think there are fundamental questions we need to understand here. In our languages, we normally say someone is healed, someone is cured. But science helps us in just answering very basic questions. One, There are people we know that have the virus, don't show any symptoms. There are people who have the virus, may need to be put away for 14, 21 days and come back. There are people who get seriously ill and need to be put on ventilators. The question is, who needs, if you go to a hospital, who needs to get umhlonyane? And I think we don't need to make this discussion very lightly, because it's a life and death situation to some people. If you are still walking, you want to drink umhlonyane to protect yourself, I don't think that's a problem. But if you're sick, you can't breathe, you can't have oxygen in your lungs, you're facing death, you need a solution. And I think let's not take these discussions very, very lightly, unless you sit as a doctor with a patient in front of you who may lose his life. So I think let's allow this debate and understand where science has a role, such that when we talk of mhlonyane and its role, especially that people will get it in a pharmacy and the doctors may prescribe it to save a life. They are not trained in traditional medicine. Maybe a traditional healer will know it better, but when people present in a hospital, they may think that they can get mhlonyane to be helped. Doctors need to understand they are trained in a particular way. If it can help in a hospital, let's do the science. Let's make it available to all sectors, because we said COVID is a leveler. So if traditional medicine can be a solution that doctors can use to patients in a hospital, let's do the science. It's not a train smash. It can be done. If it's a help, it will show that it's a help. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Professor Galeni. Gogo Pepsilia, could you please give us your very, very brief concluding thoughts, in particular maybe highlighting whether the testing of traditional medicines has got the wide support of traditional healers. Your concluding thoughts in a few, in 1 minute or so.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maybe before making my concluding statement, let me just say that, by the way, in South Africa, there's nowhere where it was mentioned that umhlonyane will be restricted from people will be protected from people going to harvest. That article was an article from Swaziland. It was taken from a Swaziland newspaper. It was not from South Africa. So I just want to say to people, no, it wasn't South African. Secondly, all healers in the country have been, we've made sure that all healers in the country are able to work. They are able to work without a problem, even a problem of a permit. But where healers are expected to go out of their homes, out of their indumba, to go and work on a patient in another village or in another location, then they'll need a permit to some degree. So people should not have a problem much about whether or not healers are allowed to work. Yes, we are allowed to work. And then lastly, I think it's very, very important. I agree with all the speakers to say, let us make sure that we invest all the efforts that we have and part of the money that we have towards the development of African traditional medicine. Let us stop waking up only when other countries are telling us we've got lots of natural resources that we can tap into. I mean, for a long time and for many years, we've been using umhlonyane. We've been using not only just umhlonyane, because if you look at the cocktail of plants that we have given to the Department of Science and Innovation, it included umhlonyane, the cannabis, and a number of other plants, linyathelo, and a number of the other plants. So we need to make sure that we don't only use umhlonyane, but we use umhlonyane in combination with other plants so that we are able to see faster results. And of course, there are situations and conditions where we think as healers, those conditions probably need some extra help from the sister sciences. That they can do. But there are some instances where, as healers, we can come together, work with all responsible departments and institutions to make sure that we develop our own remedies, our own innovation, so that people are going to be able to be saved, and life is going to be returned from just our own plants. We don't always have to get answers from the West for solutions of African problems.
Thank you very much, Gogo Masego. There are some requests from attendees to extend the session a little bit. I would like to hear from our host, Shakila, if that is possible. Shakila, is that possible?
Yes, Prof, it is possible.
So may I please be guided by you? How long can we continue? Maybe for another 15 minutes?
I think another 10 to 15 minutes would be fine.
Yeah, until
Okay.
17:15 will be okay.
Yeah.
Until 17:15. Okay. No, thank you very much. If that is the case, then I would like to pose another question that we have received in advance. There's always a tendency to look at traditional medicine as not credible. My question is, in a world defined by politics and white supremacy, is there really any hope for traditional medicines? One of the people posed this question. And then another question is, why are traditional healers, spiritual leaders, people who believe that God can heal, why are they not able to give a solution to this COVID-19? And why are they also on lockdown and scared to death that they are also going to die? So the issue is, if indigenous healers have solutions and spiritual mediums have solutions, why then don't they, why are they on lockdown and not using those medicines and spiritual methods to heal themselves and other people? Any takers on this issue?
Can I attempt the first one?
Okay.
and help the audience and everyone. We're not discussing hope of traditional medicine. The global market for traditional medicine in the whole world is multi-billion dollars. In Asia, there are hospitals, big hospitals. There are universities. So it's not a question that one doubts. In Europe, Germany is one of the countries that utilizes traditional medicine. In America, people are moving away from pharmaceuticals. They are going towards natural medicines. So it's not a question. In South Africa, in Africa, people are using traditional medicine. It may not be in the formalized market, but people access traditional healers. They get medicines prescribed. In fact, in many homes, people are buying ginger at Pick and Pay and use it at home. It's a traditional medicine. That's not a pharmaceutical product. So let's not think that this is the only thing that is a challenge for us is merely that the regulatory processes that you do, when you're gonna commercialize this and put it in the pharmacies and others can prescribe, is that what is kind of has made it a problem. It's a huge industry. And I think once the regulatory processes and the research processes are streamlined, this industry can only grow. And I think I'm dreaming here that in KZN, we want to remove all the sugar cane fields and have more herbs. You drive for kilometers only with herbs to heal you. And that's what we need to do because these herbs are food, these herbs are for healing, and they can sustain our living and economically and in many other ways. And that's what we need to do. It's not a question that there's doubts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Galeni, especially for pointing out the danger that in the future, these very, very same traditional medicines harvested on the continent will be processed elsewhere in the world, and then they will become products that will be sold to the continent at a very, very high price. So I think we do need to develop our own capacity to produce at a mass scale. Thank you very much. Mr. Mkhize Kabazela, do you have any further comments and concluding thoughts on your part?
Unmute.
Unmute yourself.
Apologies, I'm unmuted now. So I understand the apprehension with using Western science to scrutinize African medicine and herbs, but we need to also understand that China and ourselves as a population may have different levels, because there's different levels of respect for traditional healing and the herbs and medicines. The discipline around that also is very different, especially when you look at the way they handle other things like corruption. Because in South Africa, we have a very open and free market when it comes to herbs and medicines, there is great risk. And the healers that do great work will suffer at those who decide to sell fraudulent or laced herbs and medicines. So then someone's going to ask, but then who scrutinizes Western medicine? We're not scrutinizing Western medicine. We are saying us as Africans, with our own intellect, have the resources, will acquire the resources and the equipment to scrutinize our own herbs and medicines using their science. So it's not about taking our herbs and medicines and shipping them overseas for it to be done for us, but rather to be done by us, for us. Because if we don't do it, then someone else will, which is the case most of the time. A lot of indigenous knowledge and wisdom is lost because someone beats us to the punch when it comes to publication. And they beat us to the punch when it comes to IP and patents. And the only way to get that is with concrete scientific rigor and validation behind that. So sometimes it's not a matter of changing the system, but rather just using the system to work in your favor and beat the system. So we know the system and we know how it works, and we're capable of working within the system. So why don't we do that? And at Umsamo, we work beautifully and harmoniously with medical doctors because we work with the system. And in the sense that when someone is clearly medically not well enough to travel, then we will wait for them to be well enough to travel prior to us intervening. And it is possible to work beautifully and harmoniously with Western healers. It's just that there needs to be a level or common playing field. And my concern with not using scientific rigor is I worry if we have the discipline as South Africans to not have fraudulent or laced herbs and medicines within this free and open market. That is my only concern. That is my primary concern, sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Screen, there are comments that people are using umhlonyane and they are consuming it as we are speaking. And there are also comments that no, it was a mistake, that umhlonyane now needs someone to have a license to harvest it, as Professor Koko Masego has rightfully pointed out to us. Ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of further affirming traditional healing, I know we haven't addressed all the issues, the lots of questions that are being typed on the screen, but this is not the end of everything. It's an ongoing conversation. But in the interest of really trying to affirm traditional healing, I would like to again give Koko Masego another opportunity to state authoritatively what their positions and views are as traditional healers, and to convey a message to all stakeholders nationally, continentally, and internationally on the status and importance of traditional medicines as we deal with this pandemic and others.
Thank you very much. And why healers not want to work during this time of COVID-19? I think something to that effect. So as healers, we are the ones that have that approach government to say would want to be included into a program, you know, to provide solutions to the country on COVID-19. So we definitely are wanting to work, and that is why we demanded that we are part of, that we should be part of the essential service providers, health providers, and we are now. So that's that. But then maybe talking to the world, one would say, you know, would like to say to politicians, would like to say to research institutions that have worked with us, that still wants to continue to work with us, to say, if they really want to be forces to be reckoned with by traditional health practice, they have to make sure that they promote, they protect, and also they make sure that they defend traditional medicine. Because it is not okay for scientists, you know, to demonstrate to some degree some understanding that they only like to work with us when it's convenient to them, but when they're supposed to announce the breakthroughs and announce developments that breakthroughs that they've made through using traditional medicine, they're not able to do this. So it's important that also scientists support our call to make sure that traditional medicine is developed. Traditional medicine research is highly funded as every other, and that African governments should also give a chance to traditional medicine. Because if traditional medicine is not adequately provided a fair chance, then it makes us to doubt if we have good leaders in Africa. The one last thing that is important is that we are saying there is no need for us to have a WHO, because we know WHO sits in big pockets of pharmaceutical cartel. But instead, let's rather have an African structure, you know, that will be able to coordinate and be able to monitor what countries of Africa are doing with traditional medicine. How far developed is traditional medicine in those countries? Because within WHO, there is no accountability. Countries are not called to account on developments on traditional medicine. And that is why we don't, even today, we don't have WHO that supports clinical trials of traditional medicine. So you can't say you are wanting to research traditional medicine and yet you've got a WHO that blocks, you know, clinical trials for traditional medicine. You know, even the kind of ethics and the development and the research processes, there are healers involved in all of those programs. So we are just saying it's important that our president, that African governments understand the importance of working with traditional healers to develop traditional medicine and develop countries of Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Coco Masego. At this point, I will try and bring the conversation to a close. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the middle of a very, very complex and devastating pandemic. The solution to the pandemic may be somewhere in the forest of KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, or the Eastern Cape, or in the Amazon forest. But it may also be somewhere in the labs where it will be discovered by the logic of clinical trials and experimentation. Or it can be a combination of both. I think the panelists were right to say in the world in which we live, there are no either or questions. There are no either or solutions. We need to pull our efforts together and recognize that the pandemic does not care whether we use traditional medicine or experimentation or a combination of both. So on this note, I want to thank the panelists and all of you who have been part of this conversation, and invite Ms. Noma Zondo to give a very, very special vote of thanks to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of UKZN, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all that participated this evening, and also to acknowledge the time that you've taken to be with us this afternoon. I understand that you all have very busy schedules, and I'm very grateful that you are all busy flattening the curve. So, and we all need to do our part in terms of flattening the curve. I must also mention our deep sense of appreciation to our panelists who have done a very good job and gave us food for thought, and also engaged in a robust discussion. I thank you all for being here and for accepting our invitation, as always. And I would like to thank you again for the partnership that we all engaged in, especially with the traditional healers as well as the Umsamo Institute. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us tonight. I hope you'll join us again on Monday, which is Africa Day, when we're discussing issues relating to responses of COVID-19 in the continent. Please join us at 2:30 on Monday as well for another discussion. Thank you so much. All the best. Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.
And Shakila for organizing this session.
Thank you, Rama.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Let us,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let us
Bye.
continue the
Over time, so we would like to apologize as well to everyone for taking
Thank
so
you.
much time, but thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.